you mentioned is a very DNA of the Council of Europe. This year we celebrate 75th anniversary. And it's incredible how the European Convention on Human Rights, that was devised as one of the first legal documents once the Council of Europe was established, actually has several important articles dealing with that. One is certainly anti-discrimination, which is Article 14. Then it's Article 9, which is freedom of speech, freedom of belief, including religion and thought. There is also an additional protocol to the convention, Protocol 12, that actually covered anti-discrimination in detail. So on, let's say, on juridical level, we really cover these issues very importantly. Now to the issue that you mentioned, that we are firmly on position that we need to combat all forms of racism and discrimination, including anti-Muslim racism and hatred. To address the issue, you are right to say we must acknowledge the problem. And we have acknowledged the problem already for a while. You are right that it's It's spiking, the anti-Muslim hatred, but also anti-Semitism. I'm speaking about Europe, of course, because we cover 46 European states, but it exists elsewhere as well. So already 4 years ago, I established a special office of my special representative on anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim and any religious hatred to work on the issues, because my feeling was that we do things and we have specialized bodies, not only the Convention and the European Court that deals with issues when they come to the court. We have European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, which develops what we called general policy recommendations. They are numerous now. They all deal with fighting discrimination and intolerance, but there are particular two that deal with the issue. Number 5 deals with anti-Muslim hatred, and number 9 deals with the anti-Semitism. And inside that, it's a very long document each time when it's developed. And there are good practices explaining what happens, stigmatization, and how it goes, and how to go about it. And I think what is important is, and this is why it's so good to have this discussion, there are good practices, not only in Europe, around the world, how to tackle that, because we need to tackle on at least 3 levels. On prevention, and I think that's the most important, that it shouldn't happen. But while it happens, to protect victims, and we have this victim-centered approach, including real assistance to victims, psychological or other. And then, when it happens, what is important, that no crime, and this is crime, has occurred that should feel that it will not be punished. So prosecution is also important. But I think in the order I mentioned, we deal with that, especially on prevention, trying to prevent as much as it's possible, then on protection, and then prevention. And teaching people about how to deal with that is an important part. So probably for this first level, I will keep to that. But it is clear that this hatred exists, unfortunately, in Europe. Again, you mentioned the country you know the best. I think in some other places. And we need really to double or triple our work on that. I will convene, and some of the people around this table are already asked to participate on the 14th of March. I will have our first meeting organized together with the European Union Special Representative on Anti-Muslim Hatred, and hope also for colleagues from ODIHR or from the UN and others to come. I know that some member states and some people around in the audience will also go there, really to speak about it and try to not to be one-off, but to settle a coordination a place where we can meet, exchange, and tackle the issues, because condemnation is not enough. We have to act, and acting in protecting people and giving dignity and to everyone, and also tolerance that I think all of our societies needs.
Absolutely, condemnation is not enough. Maria, thank you so much. Miguel Angel Moratinos, I want to speak to you. After 9/11, you set up your alliance when Prime Minister Zapatero was the Spanish Prime Minister then, and President Erdogan, to tackle rising racism, xenophobia and Islamophobia. Why is it still rising? More than, what is it now, 20 years on?
Yes,
I mean, it's incredible.
Thank you, Maria. It's a pleasure to be back in Antalya Diplomacy Forum and to be with you. I have the chance to debate previous year in this round table, always very constructive. Let me start by thanking and congratulating the organizer to have this panel, even if they're not fully booked. I mean, I think it's one of the most serious issues that we have to discuss in today's world, because when we got to the hard issues that had been discussed previously, conflicts, wars, conflicts start, wars start, but they start by hate. And I have to say, with a lot of sadness and a lot of seriousness, that hate is back. The discourse of hate has been not so often during the last decades. We have enemies, we can have adversaries, we can have opponents, but the degree of hate have reached a momentum in today's world that's extremely dangerous. Because hate is the first step to convert hate into violence, and from violence to conflict and war. So we don't go to the root causes.
Miguel Angel Moratinos, if I could just ask you, why is hate back? I mean, you've been tackling this for so long. Did it ever even go away?
Well, and that's the reason I wanted to tell you that when you mentioned President Zapatero and President Erdogan launched this United Nations Law Civilization, the main objective was to use a political diplomatic tool to eradicate this, let's say, tendency for extremism, for violent extremism. We wanted to change the heart and minds of people. Because to counter terrorism, if we want to have a successful counter-terrorism strategy, you don't go to the root causes. You don't go to how to eliminate hate. You don't go to a situation where you respect each other and you can live together. We will start from square one. We will have again and again new terrorist attack, new exclusiveness, new diversion between countries and cultural identity, etc. So for that reason, the UNOSC, the organization I'm privileged to run, have, during the last year, worked on, let's say, two levels. One is absolutely normal, and you have mentioned that, no? Is the declaratory, no? Of course, we are every month, every week, even every day, maybe sometime, condemning either the burning of Quran or some violation of holy place or whole attitudes. Okay, and we are doing so, and we have to condemn, we have to denounce, but it's not enough. So for that reason, we have program and project to change the mind at all levels of society in order that they can really, in the medium long term, have a different attitudes towards this hate and this
But is it working? Are these programs working? Are they trickling down? Because it always seems that it is rising. I think I don't know how many panels you probably sat on that has rising Islamophobia, rising racism, rising xenophobia.
Well, now, where we are now, we are on a very, very serious momentum. I mean, I never, during my personal, political, professional life, I have never seen the degrees of increase of discrimination, racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, Christianophobia. We are in a kind of crazy world.
Even after 9/11, would you say?
Even worse.
Wow.
And I think after the 7th of October, with the crisis in the Middle East between Israel and Palestinians, even worse. So the rise of anti-Semitism has gone up, and of course, the rise of Islamophobia, the same. And the rise in Islamophobia, and I say Islamophobia, with the consequence of using this terminology, is because in my territory, that is Europe, the rise of Islamophobia is taking a tremendous development. And we should, all of us, try to stop, think about, because what we have been doing till now has not succeeded, and we have to improve. So for that reason, the meeting that the Council of Europe is going to host in 14th of March, that means in 2 weeks, in Strasbourg is extremely important. And we, the UNOC, is going to be partner, and we hope to have a follow-up, because enough with the statement. Okay, I have been raising a statement every time with the burning of Quran, with the cartoons of against the Prophet. What have to be done? What is this dialectic in the Western countries between the freedom of expression and the freedom and respect of belief and religious, and respect for the sensitivity of the other? What is the most important article in the Universal Human Rights Declaration? Article 18 or Article 19? Article 18 is the right of religion, belief, and exercising your faith. Article 19 is the freedom of expression. Who should prevail, 19 or 18? No, we have to make both. There is interaction. We cannot say that freedom of expression is over the other, or vice versa. So the United Nations also says we are now engaging with conferences like the one of Council of Europe, with others that we are going to do, with collaboration with the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference, with, of course, many Arab and Muslim countries to try to tackle this concern about Islamophobia. We can discuss another moment anti-Semitism, that is extremely serious, but here the organizers told us to talk about Islamophobia. So let's go to talk about Islamophobia. And that's one of the reasons the UNOC established a regional office in Geneva in order to be close to what is going on in Europe. So it's a serious matter, urgent matter. And I stop, is a bit extremely paradoxical that the main political discourse on all the European elections today is Islam. Can you imagine that?
For clarity, can you just repeat that?
The main issue between different parties, socialist, right-wing, center-right,
can you repeat
is
that?
How we are going to deal with Islam.
Okay, how we're going to deal with Islam is at the core of every political
But
debate.
that is what have to be tackled. And that we have to provoke, some new policies.
Correct.
And
Okay,
have
we'll come
to
to
be
that.
done. But we cannot close our eyes. That is the main issue today. For that reason, I really congratulate that you give us the floor in order to raise the awareness of the importance and seriousness of this matter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Miguel Ángel Moratinos. I want to come to you now, Evren, and speak about the root causes that have been mentioned here by both Miguel Ángel and Maria. What are they? Because, as Miguel Ángel says, it's never been this bad. And are we failing to address them? Are we not seeing them? Is it not important, policy-wise, at a local level? What are they?
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to be here with this distinguished panel as well. Can I go back and maybe address the first part of your question, which was about what we do,
Absolutely.
and then immediately come back to the second one. So I'm the personal representative of the chairmanship in office of the OSCE for combating intolerance and discrimination against Muslims, and there are actually we are 3 colleagues. So there is another special representative, personal representative, who deals with combating anti-Semitism, and then another one who deals with combating racism, xenophobia, discrimination, as well as focusing on discrimination, intolerance against Christians and other religions. So we are 3 colleagues. OSCE, very briefly, is a sui generis organization as far as I understand and see it, and I think it is, in that it has, from its inception, addressed security in a very comprehensive manner with 3 columns, as if you like. And these are, of course, political, military, environmental, economic, and the human dimension, who is, in a way, represented in distinguished director's person here with ODIHR. From the 1990s, and even before OSCE became an organization, in the documents that were decided upon, racial and ethnic hatred, xenophobia, anti-Semitism were always addressed. So this was starting 1990s, and then through the 2000s, and coming to 2002, 4, and 7, it has been sort of elaborated upon by the members, participating states, and finally, addressing, of course, anti-Muslim hatred, and specifically focusing on tolerance and non-discrimination. In 1991, ODIHR, the Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, was established, and within ODIHR right now, and I'm not going to steal any speaking notes, I'm sorry, because that is important for me. I depend in some ways in my work on ODIHR. ODIHR has established a tolerance and non-discrimination unit. So the establishment of that unit also correlates, or in timeline, to the establishment of the 3 representatives position. And right now, the representatives try to promote the good practices, try to help coordinate and cooperate with the member states and ODIHR.
How many member states? What's your scope?
57, so encompassing a large geography as well. So OSCE's special sui generis status is that it was the first security organization to handle, tackle, and think about human rights and human dimension as part of overall security. So coming from all of this to today, where OSCE has done tremendous, actually, has collected a large acquis in addressing this issue. Where do we stand right now? And obviously, we don't stand at a better place. And we are faced with, of course, globally, with a plethora of challenges, and that is going to sound totally cliche, I know, but I have to say it because the joint efforts that we need to address those global challenges actually need to go through societies that are cohesive and where people coexist peacefully. When you don't have that, then you are not going to be able to actually respond to any of the other challenges. You need to have respect,
that coexistence,
the cohesiveness, the right social fabric. And like His Excellency Moratinos put, obviously there has been a tremendous spike recently as well in anti-Semitism, in definitely anti-Muslim hatred following Israel's attacks on Gaza. And we need to think about the root causes, but I will come to this with a little anecdote maybe that I found extremely interesting and pertinent. We are all using social media, and we do all come across various videos, documentaries. And in one of those that I came across, I saw these 4 or 5-year-old kids. I don't remember which country where it was made. It's like a little research. They put these 4 or 5-year-old kids together who come from different ethnic backgrounds in a room. And they asked them, like, you know, to play. So they did. They were all happy, wonderful little kids. And afterwards, they took the kids outside and they started conversing with them. And I asked them what was different about the friend that they just played with. So none of the kids actually addressed or spoke to the skin color or any other defining, let's say, element. Rather, they just said, oh, he had a blue shirt, he had shorts, she had curly hair. So the human being at a very early age obviously is not socialized to feel any prejudice. And that, to me, coming now to the root causes, of course, it baffles me in a way. The root causes, well, cultural intolerance leads to denial. Racism leads to definitely aggression. And where we come to all of this, and all of these elements we see in anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia, I feel like, and where we come to this terrible stance or position is multifold and very complex, and it's very hard to go through it maybe here. But broadly speaking, you have political issues, for example, unresolved political conflicts, like in the Palestinian case, where such attacks as we see there right now, or conflict, where engagement, a healthy engagement with the Muslim community is hampered. And you see polarizations on all sides, and everything sort of spirals up and snowballs. So you have anti-Muslim hatred, you have anti-Semitism, it's just snowballing. You have social issues. For example, a very pertinent one is migration right now. And with migration, if this migratory pressures are not handled properly, socially, politically, or economically, you're going to inevitably see tensions growing in societies. Then there are economic problems, so domestic economic problems, international economic problems, and these can be, of course, they lead to otherizations or isolations or scapegoating. And then you have what I could think of as psychological baggage or historical baggage in some societies, coupled with maybe personal prejudices, and then fueled and played upon by politicians of the far right. So when you have this cauldron, it starts boiling and boiling. And with the Madam Secretary, like she elaborated, with Council of Europe, with the UN, us and other organizations and civil society, there has been tremendous work. But where we go from here is going to depend on following up on the commitments, definitely. But maybe more on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Evren. Matteo, just briefly tell us about what your organization does and how it's tackling these rising 3 huge issues that we clearly have seen so far getting worse and worse than they've ever been.
Yeah, no, we do a lot. And I think the first step, I mean, we have been talking about some of the root causes, so I would not dwell into it. But the first step is to acknowledge that the problem exists and to work to solve it. And one way to do it, and one way we try to contribute, we have the largest database in the world on the collection of hate crimes. And this is data that we receive both by countries, but also by civil society organizations who are on the ground and try to identify this issue. Because the problem is, you may have an act of violence, but in many, many countries, you don't have either the police or the prosecutor or the judges. They are going to assess it as biased by hate. And unless there is a recognition by the state that this is a violence, this is a, something done against someone physically or online with a biased motive, that you cannot acknowledge that the problem exists.
Just to put that into simple language, are you saying that it's not defined clearly what is xenophobia, maybe Islamophobia, or racism, or a hate crime? Is that not clearly defined?
Any form of hateful violence needs to be recognized and punished as such.
In every country, are you saying this?
Yeah,
or
this needs
the
to be
countries
done.
that you deal with?
This is work that has started recently.
Okay.
In many countries, even within Europe, in developed countries, there's no capacity at the moment, whether with the police force or in the judiciary, to identify crimes for what they are.
So just
and this goes then to the media, because the way you report about what's happening, whether it is described as a simple act of violence. I mean, we have been having these issues like, violence against women, For a long time, there was no recognition that there's an element of, hate against women, right? So now you have a lot of work to make sure that there is a clear identification of that. But this goes also to all the racial, religious, kinds of discriminations that are happening. Because unless you have the data, you cannot adopt policies to tackle that, whether it's in education or in law enforcement or in other ways.
And you're getting all this data from organizations. How easily do people come forward and report this? Because if you have a brick thrown through your window, possibly as is the case that I saw reported on UK media recently, maybe you're not willing to go forward and report that to the police, or how would the police, how would they see
There are different ways to tackle that. So there is official data from the Ministry of the Interior. We have 45 out of 57 countries that are reporting official data, okay? Then there are civil society organizations that we train to be able to identify, because of course it takes some time to be able to understand if there is a bias motive or not, right? So these data arise. But what we see, for example, in the case of hate crimes against Muslims, they are heavily underreported.
Heavily underreported.
Yes, we are talking about 10% of the cases of anti-Semitism, which is not the reality for sure. And we cannot assess from what we get that this is the reality. Even what we get is probably just a portion of what is out there. So what needs to be done is to invest institutionally in the capacity to talk about these things in a precise and specific way. And of course, is not to promote one type of response to another. All kinds of discrimination needs to be tackled, and this needs to be taken out of the political debate, because this is something that the institutions, the police, the judges need to discuss, not the politicians, frankly. This is not the job for a politician to say what needs to be done by the police or in other cases, because this affects the constitutional rights of every citizen in our region, which is to live free from fear. And we are now in a situation where actually the far-right narrative is trying to exploit this, and it has also space, unfortunately, in the media, where there is this opportunity to try to present the presence of immigrants from Muslim countries as a threat to the European way of life. If we don't stop this, this will result in a reaction, right? Because these communities, they are under threat, and if you're under threat, then you react also possibly in a violent way. So this is something very dangerous, because what we see in some cases, that when you have a serious hate crime, this is a destabilizing factor for any society. So what is maybe one homicide can become much bigger problem, also from the security perspective. So this is something that really needs to be taken more seriously by the Ministry of the Interiors of all our countries.
Mattia, I want to touch upon this with you later on and just see what this really looks like on the ground, online as well, offline, and in all its shapes and forms. Thank you so much for that. Aoun al-Hassaoune, former Prime Minister of Jordan. How is rising racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia impacting your wonderful country?
Well, at the outset, may I join previous speakers in saying that I'm delighted to be back, and I'm delighted to be back here. and grateful to the organizers for affording me an opportunity to be on this panel and to address a topical and very worrying phenomena. Xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism are all words that carry a nasty side to them, yet they are on the rise all over the world. And the main question is, as in history and in modern relations, international relations, the most important question is not what happened, but why did it happen? And I think this has to be addressed squarely. It's when you look at this, I think there are a number of reasons. First of all, if you put it in context, I think I perceive in this rise of these hateful phenomena a degree of the decline of international law as a whole and of the construction of international relations in the immediate Second World War period. And with this, I would also, and let me emphasize that I don't approach any of this with, dogmatic certainty. This is a question that can be debated, and we can all look at it, I think, in an open mind and in an inquisitive mind. The old ideologies have disappeared. The world was divided into progressives and reactionaries, into revolutionaries and counter-revolutionaries, for a number of reasons that are difficult to explain. That has all disappeared. And we start, even before September 11, to see a rise of what has been aptly called postmodern tribalism in the Balkans when it started, and elsewhere. How do we deal with this? I think we have to distinguish between different types of hate speech. With regard to Islam, I think there were roots of this hatred, and I'll have to be very clear about it. In medieval and early Islam, between Islam and the West, there's no doubt about it. For a number of reasons, not only because of the wars that have taken place, but because in many, many ways, they are quite close to each other. And it has been said, I think, by Montesquieu, that in matters of religion, those closest to each other are usually the greatest of enemies because of this competition. I think the second question is to ask whether there has been moving forces, so to speak. I remember the period after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, some would say the good old days of the Cold War, where there was a search for a new enemy. At one point, in the West, they toyed with the idea of the yellow peril. You might remember this. Others said that this enmity should be against drug barons. But Islam was settled upon as the most trendy enemy. Those who believe in this, and there are reasons why some would believe in this, would say that none of this is happening naturally. But of course, we'll be accused of espousing conspiracy theories, and I don't really personally mind being accused of espousing such theories. I wouldn't call them conspiracies, but maybe grand schemes, if that is a more pleasant sounding word.
But Your Excellency, sorry to interrupt. I mean, this is fascinating for us because you are also a former judge at the International Court of Justice that has been so much in the news. And you just said that there's been a decline of international law as one of the reasons why we're seeing this rise. Can you...
Well, that's a bit out of our... But never mind. It's, I think...
From the eyes of the law.
I think there's a decline in international law. I mean, there are many indicators. I wouldn't want to go into this in detail, but let me point out, first of all, that in all questions that relate to international peace and security, international law seems to be at a loss to do anything. I mean, I'm speaking of the, the conflation of Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. I am speaking of the lack of advancement in the codification and progressive development of international law. You might remember that the golden days of codification were in the 60s and the 70s, where all the great codifications took place. We now find it difficult to accept a codification, and when that does happen, it's only, I mean, this is a very technical thing, but I will mention it. It's not in the form of a binding convention, but in terms of the, for example, the articles on state responsibility. State responsibility is the backbone of international law, and it took years and years and years to codify it under incredibly distinguished international lawyers. I mention some of them offhand: Gaetano Aranjo Ruiz of Italy. I would say James Crawford, who saved that codification. But after all this effort and all this endeavor, the international community, whatever that term means, and I think there are many, many definitions of what the international community is, it was only in the form of articles. There are, and I just look at the present conflict in Gaza and the total failure so far of the political side or of the United Nations. I mean, the Security Council, and to a large extent also the lack of effectiveness of the General Assembly. So now, you know, the thing is, the matter is before the ICJ, and I wouldn't want to pass a judgment on that for obvious reasons. So that's another reason. We will be blind if we don't take that into consideration. The third thing, I think, the decline in democracy, if I may put it that way. Democracy is becoming majoritarianism. And when there is no basic difference between the different parties in a state, it is almost natural that fear, which is the strongest of all human instincts, should become fear of the unknown, fear, and I think one of the lessons of history is that whenever there is a dominant group, both at the national or the international level, and that group feels that in the long run its dominance will be upset, will be diminished, that is usually when the most irrational decisions are taken.
How would you describe that fear right now?
I'm sorry?
How would you describe that fear right now?
Well, I think we lived under a period when the world was unipolar, and now that world is splintering, if you like, with aspirants and with fear. And you can see that fear being expressed, and it is expressed in terms of Islamophobia, in my opinion, the wrong culprit, but nevertheless, it's an easy thing. So, I mean, this is a stark example, I think. There are other reasons. I think this lack of solidarity among the international community, and again, I must put that term in brackets, feeling that you can have a war in the Balkans, for example, without resultant mass migration to Western Europe is one of, I mean, you simply cannot do that.
Okay.
And the same is, of course, the Middle East. Middle East has now become a crisis area, permanent crisis area. And I remember the time when there were barely any immigrants from the Middle East, for example, to the United Kingdom or to Western Europe. And when I now go to The Hague, or I find it full of Afghanis and people who have never had a long tradition of seafaring or of migration. We have to ask why. Again, this is always the most important question, and not just to describe, what has happened. Why do these people, why is there this pull factor to bring all these people from Afghanistan and Iran and Kurds, and you have it into Western Europe. So, I mean, this could be the subject matter of a very deep and lengthy
Absolutely.
debate.
Our next panel here, next year, Your Excellency. It really is important, the driving factor, that why. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We'll come back to you later, but thank you so much for those details. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to go back to you, Maria, and just talk about a bit more about how your organization is tackling this issue. And in a recent speech, you described the alarming rise of hate crimes and incidents across Europe, and earlier you spoke about prevention, protection, and prosecution. I mean, is that something also that you'll be discussing in that meeting on the 14th of March? I mean, actual action?
What I didn't mention is that actually the meeting on the 14th will be larger than Europe, so there will be some people coming over from the US, Canada, and I think the problem is global. And from what we heard, it's clearly shared by this panel, and no one organization or no one country can deal with that. And the real thing is really what are the root causes, and many things that the panel members have mentioned one could reflect on or have the whole discussion on that. So yes, we would like to see how the feeling around the room will be there. And as I mentioned, the idea is not to have one-off, but to start with very thorough discussion and see what are the good practices, because we were talking about the problems. Matteo and some others also spoke how the other different organizations are dealing with that. So certainly, and I like the data gathering. We also, in the general policy 5 on fight against anti-Muslim hatred, is also acknowledging, what is happening, how is it happening, stigmatization, attacks and all that, and also how to come from acknowledging that there is a problem, and then through the circle because the prosecutors will not prosecute unless in the penal code you have the crime described. And for instance, also it was mentioned hate speech. We also have one recent recommendation generally on hate speech online and offline. And whatever happens offline is very much magnified in the online world. So actually, I think a lot has to be done. It is back to each and every state, member state, participating state, to deal with the issue. But only together we can acknowledge where we are, where the problems are, what the possible solutions are, and find a way how to tackle the issues. So training is one of the things. Also, Matteo was mentioning, the police has to be trained to recognize the problem and then report, and all the others. Prosecutors also have to have a possibility to go along that way. So actually, I think we have at different places probably different levels of development, but altogether I think we should move quicker and not go each and every country it's a lonely way, but learn from each other. So the idea is from this meeting on the 14th and in the future to really come together with best practices and see what we can do more at the different levels. So certainly these are very difficult times, and I think the Prime Minister was talking about decline in democracy. Unfortunately, generally there is a decline in rule of law, in democracy and human rights. And you know, we were wondering, how did we get there? And we did get there because of fear, you may say fears, but also because we were not, it's not that there are not tools to deal with that. We are just not implementing them. So in many ways, I think at least I can speak about the countries, member states of the Council of Europe. So my answer to because I was acknowledging, I issue every year the annual reports, and each year, actually, I was acknowledging that there is a decline in all of these three areas that are in the mandate of the Council of Europe, which also concern the issue of anti-Muslim hatred, racism, and xenophobia. And then the real question is, so how do you go about it? I would first say that each and every responsible country has to deal first with what they can do with what we have. But we should also develop further. So I think the work of international community cannot replace, actually, it's only an assistance to member states, participating states, to implement what we have. But we very often, and I again speak of the 46, have at hand the tools. We have to implement them. Yeah. And therefore that we need political will. Absolutely. Boils down to something which seems so obvious, but we have to deal with that because, as all speakers say, if we leave the hate rise, then our societies will be destroyed, and then there is no future. You know, the Council of Europe was made on the premise never again, never such wars that we witnessed in Europe. And because of that, we developed so many legal instruments, starting with the European Convention on Human Rights. Now we have over 220. Incredible. Very detailed. We need to implement them, and we need to work against, because many things you said, you know, we also have younger generation at home. And I can tell you, you know, my daughter would come to me when there was a pressure on migration in the country I come from. And, you know, in the school, they were talking about it. And then immediately she was like, she said, I will write an essay on Islam. I said, why would you do that? She said, because, Mom, in the school, you know, people were putting a equal sign between the migration and Islam / fear. And she said, it cannot be. You know, so just saying that, you know, we should, and especially for young people, you know, they see that, but if we don't give them, empower them, and give them the right to live in dignity with everyone around, because this is where we started from at the Council of Europe, that we'll give everyone, you know, dignity in living together in diversity. And absolutely. I think it's good that we have developed modern, diverse societies. We learn and actually give each other more when we go right way. But when we fear each other, then the spiral goes all the way down.
When we fear each other.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful few words put together there. Miguel Angel Moratinos, I just want to ask you about what's at stake with regards to social cohesion. If, as Maria said, when we fear each other.
Well, I will answer your question, but I want to comment two issues after listening my colleagues in this very constructive dialogue. No? One is related with the so-called social network, online, hate speech, and I fully agree that we have to take that seriously, and we have to make some policies in order to really avoid or reduce or mitigate or eradicate online hate speech and all kind of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, etc. But what really concerns me more is not the civil society using TikTok, that is very dangerous. What really concerns me is when political leaders are using a hate discourse. And they are the ones who promote this Islamophobia, this anti-Semitism, this discrimination, this racism. And we all, international organizations, as we are member state organization, we don't criticize political leaders.
That's such a good point you make there.
Practically, because it's quite sensitive. But I think we have some debate in the UN recently, and we raised this issue, and we should try to take into account that, because it can be extremely negative, because if the top leaders inflame the debate, of course, civil society is going to continue. Even it's going to multiply. And then our friend Odile, I really appreciate his intervention, because yes, of course, you have to be very precise, with and how to have the law enforcement possible in order to really counterattack this spread of racism, Islamophobia, etc. And we have witnessed that recently in Sweden, in Denmark, where, well, the Swedish government was extremely under very heavy pressure due to the, the sensitivity in the Islamic world. Why Sweden cannot do anything? That a man every Friday go to in front of the mosque, and even advancing, he was going to burn the Quran. And they said they couldn't do anything. How you can do anything if you know it's going to affect the public order, that is going to affect your international relationship, that you are going to produce a polarization in the whole debate in your society and international world. So something has to be done. But the problem with Sweden is that they have, the constitution didn't allow them to intervene. So they are trying, and I think what Odile and you are doing extremely well, is to provide member states with the capabilities to have some rules, some procedure in the police, in the judiciary, as you say, that can, avoid this kind of situation. That's number one. Number two, our friend from Jordan, I think he mentioned a very important element. In today's, it was before, as you say, it's not from the 9/11. Well, 9/11 in my dear Alliance of Civilization was the response to the clash of civilization, Mr. Samuel Huntington. Samuel Huntington, extremely erudite, very advanced professor, not a stupid one, with a lot of capabilities. Why they announced the clash of civilization? It was in 1990, 1 year after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when the superpower, hyperpuissance of the United States was overwhelming, politically, militarily, financially, economically. But they realized the conservative environment of the United States and the West, with the comments, that the cultural and religious element, they couldn't impose their view, their hegemony. They could impose politically, militarily, economically, financially, but when it was referring to culture, to religions, that you cannot impose. So the only way to impose was a clash to defeat the other, and to defeat mainly Islam. So that was the rationale of the class, and that's the reason we counter-propose the lines. So what is going on now is this ideological fight between the West and the rest. And we all, of course, here in this forum, we are all multipolar. Well, I don't know, we are universal. Of course, I'm very proud to be Western. I'm very proud to be European. I fight to be European Western. But I recognize that there are others. And they have the same right as me to live together. And unfortunately, in the West, in so important quarters of the West, they are afraid. The end of the West, the decline of the West. We are not more like before. And they are looking to the one who was coming. And this French professor, Renaud Camus, no Albert Camus, Renaud Camus, wrote what they call la théorie du remplacement, the replacement theory. They are coming to replace us. They are going to destroy all the churches. They are going to put all the mosques in France, in Spain, in Italy. And there is this obsession. Because they are not convinced of the most important contribution of the West to the world, that is our values. The values that have been defended in Council of Europe, democracy, human rights, and that give us the sense of sharing the future of us. So I stop here to tell you, we have, of course, to deconstruct this discourse. And that's what we are trying to do in the Alliance of Civilization, with a specific program, a specific project, and multiplying the dialogue. Without dialogue, it's going to be very difficult to really understand each other. And I think that is what we have after this meeting and the meeting we have, to really multiply this kind of encounter, to really fight and find a place where we all respect each other and live together.
What a wonderful way to finish there. We have a few more minutes to go. Everett, as briefly as possible, just the way ahead, as briefly as possible.
Very briefly, but human civilization is an amalgam of our collective wisdom. This collective wisdom has certain aspects which are mutually reinforcing, inclusive, interactive. And Muslims and Islam has contributed to the development of this civilization for centuries. However, xenophobia, racism, and the like have also been with us for centuries. Where we can probably move forward is, it has been already mentioned, is to, go on our commitments, mutual respect, dialogue between and understanding between religions and cultures. Also for governments, or what the governments need to be probably disseminated through the larger community or society, through maybe target groups like the media, the youth, and civil society. So we need a policy framework, and this, our fight, let's say, it's not a very good word, but our efforts should be sustained and consistent, I would say.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Matteo, just to finish, out of the data that you've collected, what concerns you most? What would you do going forward? Briefly, please.
Well, based on the data, there's a lot that can be done if you try to implement, the norms which are already there. But I think one element which I think builds on the reflection that we have been hearing today is that the same forces that are pushing for intolerance and discrimination are the same forces that are going to challenge also democracy and the rule of law. So this is, in the end, is not going to be about Islam or anti-Semitism. It's about whether we keep rule of law and democracy in our nations. because those politicians that are using this narrative to gain popular support, they will use it also to avoid the law enforcement, avoid the judiciary, to intervene also in other cases.
And just very quickly, that
Yeah.
point that Miguel Angel made about political leaders using hate speech, is that
It is,
defined
I mean,
when
one
they
of
make it?
One of the core business of our organization is election monitoring. We observe elections throughout all the countries. So we observe that now, for the time being, is about the campaign. But you see that the campaign they're becoming more polarized.
Okay.
Racial slurs, stereotypes used more and more because it pays off. And so how do you break that? And then you need political leaders that are going to say, enough. This has no, space in a democratic society. And the link is still not there because the victims of this rhetoric are usually the minorities. It's not the majority, right? So
Good
the
point.
general population don't feel it yet. But when you have a leader, then it's going to dismantle the judiciary. Freedom of the media, other things is going to come for us. So that's why this comprehensive approach is so important. You cannot separate the issue of the minorities for what happens in the entire society. So that's, I think, the effort and the awareness that we need to continue to raise.
Thank you so much, Matteo. Your Excellency, final thoughts from you to close our panel today. It's been a fascinating discussion. It's full of so many layers and complexities. The way forward, will we be seeing rising racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia in the next, let's say, decade, or will policy be put into place? Can things even change?
Well, I think in the short run, there is need for a legislative reaction to what is happening. I mean, do you think that there is less anti-Semitism now? No. But because of the legislative reaction, the protection of which I support, of course, of things related to the Jews in view of the history of European Jewry and other things, many people who deep inside are still anti-Semitic cannot express their hate speech with the same freedom they can, for example, with regard to Islam. I also cannot believe that the freedom of expression guaranteed under the covenants is one that allows people to antagonistically insult Islam and the feelings of Muslims. That freedom is not a carte blanche to say whatever you like. It has never been like that, and any freedom that is not circumscribed by morality, by decency, by politeness also, is not worth the name freedom, I think. In the long run, I think there are deeper questions, trends, where history and psychology have their own roles to play in this. And until that happens, I really cannot think of any way of dealing with this problem. I will just, if I may, comment on something about these writings that started to appear, Fukuyama and Ferguson, I think, Clash of Civilization. Most of the ideas, the basic ideas, are taken from a historian who, in my opinion, is the greatest historian of the 20th century, Arnold Toynbee. But if you look at Toynbee's work and the work of these people, you can see a decline, from the profound, the comprehensive, the universal, to a mere description of, prophesizing the inevitability of a clash. And I think once people start reading Toynbee's seminal work, a study of history, maybe there will be some improvement.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I would love to open the floor to Q&A. I think just one question. I see this lady here, very briefly, in general to the panel. What's your name? Can we quickly get a mic? One question. Mike, very quickly. No, she would.
Okay, thank you very much for this panel, which is very important by the topic, and I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, as you said, the rising racism, xenophobia and Islamophobia. Alors, bon rétablissement pour l'Europe. But just we can say that in the upcoming elections in European Parliament, I think far right will become the center, which is the main source of which feeds the Islamophobia, not in hatred. And I'd like to when we think about the massacre, genocide in Gaza, we can say that the hatred in Europe, in the West, resulted with their complicity and their silence regarding the massacres going on in Gaza. It's just when we just look at the position of Eric Zemmour, you mentioned grand remplacement theory, which he mentioned also. And I think, okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, we're really running out of time. Who would like to briefly touch on that in 1 minute?
I didn't hear what the lady said.
Okay. I won't put it to you.
So maybe
anybody else?
What about Europe, about election in
Yes.
Europe? I don't think so. Of course, you can criticize Europe. I criticize my own European compatriots, no? But not the European public opinion. European public opinion are absolutely, concerned about what is going on in Gaza, in Palestine. And there has been, rallies and protests and pressure to the government to take much determined position, not to stop this situation. But I agree with you, it's going to be one of the main issues in the European election, no? So what is at stake is going to be how we defend the real, European values, as our friend from Obdir said. I mean, it's not a question of Islam, of Judaism, or the racism. It's the question of democracy. It's the question of human rights. And so what is going on in Gaza is a question of human rights, of, absolute violation of UN Charter. So that is what really have to concern us. So I think that is part of the soul of Europe. I mean, Europe is not always what, you hear here and there in some statement of some politician. Is what has been the history of Europe, no? And you go to the Schuman Declaration, when he was, the first step to create this fantastic idea of European community, and the word peace and reconciliation and human rights are essential to our soul. The problem is that we are losing our soul. And that is what really makes me in a fighting mood, because I'm a European. And so I have to defend the great values. For that reason, you have the Council of Europe. I will say when I go to Strasbourg, they say, what is doing the Council of Europe? I'm sorry. Nothing more than democracy, human rights, and rule of law. Nothing more than that. Not important. Well, that is what is Europe. It's not the, the other issues, no?
But can I just come with something that was said? But all of that in search of peace.
Yes.
And I think if we have hate,
Absolutely.
we will have no peace.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all our fantastic panelists and you, our audience. Sorry, there was no more Q&A. Apologies, but thank you to all of you. A quick thank you, a round of applause. Do join me in thanking all of our panelists. Maria Pecinovic-Burier, thank you so much. Miguel Angel Moratinos, thank you. Evan Dadelen Akun and Matteo Mekachi and Aum Al-Hassaouna, thank you all so much. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Thank you to all.